Dateline Mystery.
On a deadly mission.
Police, everyone on the ground right now! Right now, get on the ground! Everybody on the ground right now, on your knees! On your knees!
The Sonoran Desert in Arizona. Picturesque, bleak, and brutally hot. Life here is a constant battle for survival. On its northeastern edge sits the state capital, Phoenix. By 10 a.m. on August 10th, 1991, the temperature has already reached 94 degrees. Two Thai immigrants arrive at the Buddhist temple on the western edge of the city.
They came there almost every week. They took turns cleaning, cooking meals for the monks. That was that part of their temple membership. They thought that the monks were praying, and that seemed to make sense to them. They'd often find them lying on the floor.
Hey, what do you think of this? It looks like the cord has been cut.
They wonder if the monks have an explanation for the broken phone cord.
It was the smell of the blood that struck them at first, and then the visualization of it. And then they realized that they weren't asleep, that they were dead.
The women flee the temple and drive to a nearby home where they call 911. Within minutes, deputies from the Maricopa County Sheriff's Office arrive in force.
When I get here, the outside temperature is 113 degrees. It's sweltering. There are groups of Asians being held back by the police. There are helicopters, Hueys, flying overhead.
But it's the scene inside the temple that's truly shocking.
I'd seen a lot of murders. People beheaded, people shot in the head, people killed in train wrecks, car crashes. I had never seen anything quite so breath-stopping as this in one place at one time.
9 bodies are arranged in an oval with their heads toward the center. The victims are lying face down with their hands behind them. All have been shot in the back of the head at close range.
There are no indications whatsoever that these victims resisted the attack in any way. In fact, they're very non-violent people. And to have them murdered like that, I think just incensed the sensibilities of everybody.
6 of the victims are monks, most in their 30s and 40s. Also among the dead are a 71-year-old nun, her 16-year-old grandson, and a 21-year-old man who'd been visiting the temple.
These were all people who had been invited in, had been living there for some time, some of them for several years. So they were residents of this monastery.
The savageness of the crime stuns the local Buddhist community. Clues to the weapons used are everywhere. Investigators recover 17 casings from a .22 caliber rifle and 4 yellow shotgun shells.
The shell casings on the floor and the shotgun shell casings being 20 gauge were very unusual for homicides. It was almost like these are the guns that farm boys would have right in this community behind their bedroom doors.
The motive is more elusive. A search of the temple reveals numerous items are missing, including stereo equipment, cameras, jewelry, and cash totaling around $2,600. The temple's safe is in plain sight, but hasn't been touched.
The fact that the safe was not opened gave me the thought that the monks either didn't know the combination or they refused to tell the killers the combination to the safe.
Investigators wonder if robbery is the sole motive for the worst mass murder in Arizona history, as the word Bloods is carved into one of the walls.
We never once suspected the Blood Gang, because they would not do that in that manner. We thought that was put there to throw us off.
The murders make front-page news throughout the country and the world.
We're not there. They systematically killed the 9 people.
Officials in Washington assure the Thai government that everything is being done to catch the killers.
In a normal homicide investigation, there is pressure, but it's mostly self-induced pressure. When you're in a situation where you have 9 dead people with international attention, it was like being in a pressure cooker, turned on high with the steam blowing all the time.
The Maricopa County Sheriff's Office forms a task force to handle the investigation.
It ultimately blossomed into something involving more than 200 people total. 66 of those were sworn peace officers from 7 or 8 different police agencies. They, of course, were not one cohesive unit.
Russ Kimball, the county's top homicide detective, takes the lead running the day-to-day operations of the task force.
With so many agencies involved, it's hard to get them around one concept and one idea, and here's what we have to do. And here's what your assignment is. Everybody has their own ideas.
A month into the investigation, police are no closer to solving the murders.
During the month between August 10th and September the 10th, the task force investigated hundreds and hundreds of people, but they didn't find a single viable suspect that they thought looked good for any part of this crime.
Then, finally, a break. The task force receives a tip that a rifle similar to one of the guns used in the murders was spotted by MPs at a nearby Air Force base. What's more, they get a name.
Rolando Caratachea.
Going a little fast there, weren't you?
Is this the face of a killer? In September 1991, a special task force in Phoenix, Arizona, is investigating a mass murder at a Buddhist temple. Their best chance at catching who did this is to track down the murder weapons, a .22 caliber rifle and a 20 gauge shotgun. It's now a month since the murders, and the pressure is intense. The task force receives a tip from MPs at Luke Air Force Base. They report that 17-year-old Rolando Caratachea has recently been stopped on the base in possession of a .22 caliber rifle.
Is that your gun right there?
Yeah.
At the time, the MPs had not realized its potential importance.
And they didn't know that the sheriff's office was looking for a .22 rifle.
It's my gun. Just go ahead and pull it out for me.
So when they found one on base,
There she is.
but with 2 teenagers in a car, they told them to get off the base and take that rifle with them.
I suggest you go ahead and take it and get out of here and don't come back.
All right.
Luke Air Force Base is a mile from the temple.
We went out to interview Rolando.
The teenager produces the rifle, but claims he didn't have it at the time of the murders.
Well, it'll need to be cleaned. I loaned it to my friend, and he just brought it back dirty.
So what's the name of your friend?
We asked him who he had loaned the rifle to.
Oh, I don't remember. I have a lot of friends.
What do you know about a Buddhist temple?
Karatachea shares an apartment with 17-year-old Jonathan Duty.
Duty was a military brat. His father was stationed at Luke Air Force Base. He was very much into ROTC.
Duty says he's horrified by the murders.
Brother was
And he told us that, in fact, his friend had been an acolyte at the temple, in fact, had been one of the victims that had been murdered.
Do you hang out with anybody else?
no.
Detectives take the rifle back to police headquarters, planning to submit it to the state crime lab for testing. But it's one of dozens of weapons seized.
We directed it to be placed into evidence, to be tested in a long line of rifles. I believe there were 90 at the time in line to be tested.
Meanwhile, another lead comes in from Tucson. Police there receive a call from a man claiming to have information about the murders. He says his name is Kelsey Lawrence. A quick background check draws a blank.
No birth record, no employment record, nothing.
They trace the call back to a Tucson psychiatric hospital and soon discover who dialed them.
Only at that point did he tell him his real name was Michael Lawrence McGraw.
Let me out of here. Let me out of
McGraw is relentlessly questioned.
2 investigators would interview him at a time and get one story.
I wasn't anywhere. Understand me?
They would wear out and say, we can't get any more, and the commander would send in almost tag teams. 2 more, and then maybe 2 more after that.
McGraw cracks.
There was 8. They drove from Tucson to Phoenix.
In 2 cars, they drove to what he called a church.
They all went in, and I stayed outside.
After they were in there for an hour or so, he said they all came running out and they left.
Was there something on the wall? Bloods?
This guy must know something, because they knew that the fact that the word Bloods had been carved into the wall had not been released to the press.
McGraw stands by his claim that he was not directly involved in the actual murders.
Here this guy is in a psychiatric hospital,
Let me out of here.
but yet we're not thinking clearly enough. What's his past? What's his history?
Investigators push McGraw to name his alleged accomplices.
Okay.
4 men are brought in to undergo relentless questioning. After hours of grueling interrogations, they all confess to the Temple Massacre. On September 13th, they're charged with 9 counts of first-degree murder and become known to the world as the Tucson Four.
I remember one young SWAT team member sitting down with me and saying, how did you guys ever get so good? There was a great sense of relief immediately.
The task force announces they've recovered one of the Temple murder weapons from the Tucson Four, a Marlin rifle. Hours later, there's shocking news.
The state crime lab tested the .22 Marlin semi-automatic rifle and immediately determined that it was not the murder weapon. They unequivocally ruled it out as the murder weapon based on the ballistics at the scene.
Totally just amazed and shocked we were totally baffled.
The next day, there's another disturbing development. All 4 of the suspects retract their confessions, alleging they'd been coerced.
These were long interrogations by tagged teams of investigators trying to lead them into admissions, and all of them were ultimately said the same thing. I would have told them anything to get out of that room. I didn't do it, but I told them I did just to get out of the room.
We still felt that there was sufficient evidence to go forward to the grand jury, and we did go forward and obtain several indictments at that time.
Then the crime lab identifies the real murder weapon. The .22 caliber rifle, taken from Rolando Carratachea weeks earlier.
It just floored me. So now we have a murder weapon totally unassociated with the Tucson 4.
In a campground north of Phoenix, campers find a woman's body in the back of her pickup truck. She's been shot twice in the back. Police have no idea who killed her or why. But time will reveal a shocking connection to the Temple murders. After charging 4 Tucson men with the massacre of 9 members of a Buddhist temple, investigators learned the murder weapon traces back to someone else, Rolando Carratachea, a 17-year-old high school student whose rifle was seized 6 weeks earlier.
Certainly, Rolando Carrattacea's rifle makes him a prime suspect.
Carratachea is part of a local gang called the AM Posse, a group of teens known for creating mischief after midnight.
They would break into cars and maybe break into abandoned warehouses, things like that.
With 2 burglary arrests in the months preceding the Temple murders, Rolando Carratachea is firmly in the investigators' sights.
So the task force has to take a whole new direction. We have to start focusing on Carratachea and, of course, everybody he knows.
Carratachea is close friends with 17-year-old Jonathan Duty and 16-year-old Alex Garcia.
All 3 boys were classmates at a high school in Avondale, Arizona. They were friends. At different times during the summer, they had lived with one another in their homes.
Rolando Carratachea is brought in for questioning.
All right, we don't need to have any lawyers in here, and you don't need to get my parents involved. So, what do you want?
He was cocky. He was self-confident. He was self-assured. He denied everything.
The interrogation drags on for hours. But Carratachea maintains he's no killer.
It wasn't
After Carratachea told us who he loaned the rifle to, and we went looking for Alex Garcia and Jonathan Duty.
Police find Duty at the local high school football game, where his ROTC unit is presenting the flag.
They told him they needed to talk to him about the rifle that Rolando Carratachea had loaned him, and he volunteered to come to the police station to talk to us.
Born in Thailand, Duty's biological father dies when he is only 6 years old. His mother abandons him and moves to Germany, where she meets and marries an American soldier.
She sent Jonathan and his brother to family members to a different place in Thailand, so he lost his home as well.
2 years later, Duty and his brother are reunited with their mother and new stepfather in Germany.
So now Jonathan has to acclimate to a new father, a new country, where the climate is different, the food is different, the languages are different.
His stepfather punishes him for his poor English.
Are you listening to me?
There were beatings and there was aggressive behavior in the home. We later learned that Jonathan also may have witnessed his mother being beaten or treated poorly.
I don't understand. Why don't you understand? understand what I'm saying?
I think Jonathan's primary response psychologically was to withdraw. And what he did was withdraw into himself.
I don't understand why you don't listen to me.
He's protecting himself psychologically so that whatever's happening doesn't hurt so much.
The family moves from Germany to Georgia and then, finally, Arizona, where once more, Duty finds himself getting bullied.
He wasn't very social. He had a very thick accent, so he got picked on, and he got teased, and he was bullied, often to his face.
The way that a child responds, by the age of 9 or 10, depends on how they responded earlier in life. So in Jonathan's case, he further withdrew. He went up into his head, where he could play and fantasize a world that was safer, more in control.
Duty realizes he needs to toughen up and becomes enamored by the world of the soldier.
The discipline of the military, the flying, of the orderliness, predictability of the military lifestyle. This was all very entrenched in his thinking.
In high school, Duty finally finds a friend in Alex Garcia, who's also had a difficult childhood.
Alex has this idea that his brother is the favorite.
Your brother's report card is always a pleasure to read. Why is yours just average?
That experience is bound to cause feelings of anger and resentment.
What are you going to do about this? You going to improve your grades?
But in any family and in any culture, anger against the parents is taboo. So many times what happens is the anger is there,
All you do is walk away.
but it gets suppressed.
Garcia also gravitates towards the military. He joins the ROTC, where he serves at times under Jonathan Duty.
For once, these two young men, these teenagers, felt like they could fit in. For Jonathan, Alex was the peer that wasn't going to tease him, that would tolerate his language difficulties. For Alex, Jonathan was the older brother who was finally giving him some respect.
They train fanatically, even fantasizing about running their own covert operations.
They were obsessed with military history, military missions, military weapons. They strategized on how they might engage in a mission.
Now, in a small room in the sheriff's office, Duty's interrogation is all too real. That same night, police find his friend, Alex Garcia, and bring him in for questioning. They also obtain search warrants for the home Garcia and Duty have been sharing.
During the summer of 1991, Duty's father was transferred to another Air Force base in Colorado. But Jonathan convinced his parents that he should be allowed to stay and live with Garcia for the rest of the school year.
The search uncovers cameras and stereos, just like those stolen from the temple, and a 20-gauge shotgun, which could be the second weapon used in the temple murders.
I was pretty certain that it was going to come back a ballistic match to the 20-gauge shotgun shells found on the floor of the temple. I knew we were going to be able to put Alex Garcia in the temple.
Police send the shotgun to the crime lab for immediate testing, but Garcia now refuses to answer questions.
I want an attorney.
In the adjoining room, detectives continue to question Jonathan Duty. He's more cooperative.
And the investigator that was questioning Jonathan, his style was very soft, it was very gentle. And of course, this was what Jonathan had been missing his entire life. I think he had a sense that this is what Jonathan needed in order to be understood, in order to be heard.
You were involved in this, right?
Yes.
Duty admits he was at the temple with Garcia and claims Karatechea and 2 others were also there.
But he admits only that he was physically present at the scene. He denies shooting anybody, he denies having a gun, he denies firing a gun.
Alex Garcia is able to hear through the thin wall everything his friend is confessing to.
Jonathan's next door, right?
And that may have compelled him to want to tell the truth, to testify, to tell us exactly what happened. I said, Alex, if you know anything, it's time for you to talk to us about it. But that's entirely up to you.
In the meantime, you should talk to your father. He's here waiting to see you.
And I left the room.
Garcia is allowed to talk to his father.
The commander is calling me and my partners in to do another interrogation with Alex Garcia.
Somebody told us there was a golden Buddha made out of solid gold.
We need to do something so I can get money to buy my car.
So what are we gonna do?
We're gonna break into the Buddhist temple. They carry this golden Buddha.
Somebody told them that the Buddha in the temple was actually solid gold. They're just young and dumb enough to believe that.
We wanted to steal it.
Garcia's version was that because they liked to do military things, that they would invade this temple as a military intrusion exercise.
I got my dad's shotgun, and Jonathan had Rolando's .22. I wore a green scarf around my face. And Jonathan had a hat and these tank goggles. We got it all from the family store on base. So when we got to the temple, we did what we trained for. We just snuck in through the front door.
Everyone on the ground right now! Right now, get on the ground!
We burst in and Jonathan yelled, "Police!" And there were 5 or 6 monks. They seemed a little startled to see us. Jonathan told the monks that there were some escaped convicts and that we were there looking for them.
I'm gonna go around.
You don't have to sit right here. What? To the ground!
There were things breaking, things falling. All this noise was going on. And then he came back in.
Come on, let's go! Let's go! Everyone on the ground right now! Alex!
Then it was my turn to go in through the other rooms and see if there's any other valuables we missed.
Everybody on your stomach right now! Hurry up!
When I came back, Jonathan was standing on the couch, pointing his gun at all the monks. Jonathan turned around and told me,
No witnesses. We gotta go.
then he started shooting. He walked around, shooting them in the back of the head with his gun. He shot some of them a couple of times, just to make sure they were dead. Bang, bang, bang. I took the shotgun and I just shot it off 4 times. I couldn't tell you why.
It was one of the spine-chilling, most cold-blooded confessions I had ever heard from a killer. I did this, Jonathan did that, and there was no emotion associated with it. There was not one iota of remorse in Alex Garcia.
When it was all over, they were all dead. So we left.
They had planned and were acting out their own mission. In this case, it was Lieutenant Duty and Officer Garcia. It was pure fantasy, except they carried it out, and 9 innocent people were killed in cold blood.
They carved bloods on a wall and set off a fire extinguisher to confuse the police.
The Tucson 4 had nothing to do with it. It was just me and Jonathan.
I had to pause for a minute because I was sick to my stomach. I believed him, and I realized we had arrested the wrong people.
Ballistics tests on the shotgun recovered from Garcia's home prove it was used at the temple. A boot belonging to Garcia also matches a footprint found at the crime scene.
So we knew that we had corroborating evidence now, and it was not just a confession.
The sheriff is given an ultimatum.
There was a public pronouncement on my part that unless a link was found between the Tucson 4 and Jonathan Duty and Alex Garcia, I was going to release the Tucson 4.
Because the case against Duty is relatively weak, prosecutors decide to offer Garcia a deal.
Sometimes you got to twist them. That's what we say it in law enforcement. You give somebody a little bit better of a plea to help get the other individual.
In exchange for his testimony against Duty, Garcia will not receive the death penalty. But there are certain conditions that have to be met.
A part of any standard offer like that is you got to be totally truthful. You got to tell us about all crimes that you've committed.
An attorney explains the deal to Garcia, then calls Romley with a revelation.
Alex Garcia's attorney had contacted us and said, I need to tell you something. Alex Garcia was involved in another murder. We were floored. I mean, truly floored.
Me and Michelle, we decided...
In a deposition, Garcia says that a month after the Temple murders, he began dating 14-year-old Michelle Hoover.
Garcia meets young Michelle Hoover, who's well-liked, well-respected, well-known in the community, a good student. But this is her first boyfriend. This is her first experience with boys. And he romances her, and she becomes very infatuated with him in a very short period of time.
She's got her sights set on becoming a professional drag racer.
Her family did not approve of her dating him, but they let her see him under supervised circumstances.
I told her we needed to get out of here.
Garcia chafes under the supervision and decides it's time for him to give the orders. He tells Michelle to steal her father's truck and pistol and run away with him.
Why did you want to take the gun?
In case we needed it.
And they launched off with very little money and very little food.
She was infatuated with him in the way that a first love only can be. So when Alex proposed the plan that they run away together, she was all over it.
They end up at a campground northeast of Phoenix. Out of money, the couple begins searching for someone to rob. They soon meet 50-year-old Alice Cameron.
I'm Alice.
Nice to meet you, Alex.
Hey, Alex.
So, what brings you out here?
Just wanted to get away.
He engages her in a conversation, and he finds out that this woman is camping alone. And so they think she would make a likely target.
This was a place that Alice went to relax. And it was beautiful. She had a little pickup truck, and that's where she would rest or sleep. She would stay overnight, and she loved it. She went there just as a getaway.
Now it's Garcia's turn to devise the mission, which at best will gain a few dollars rather than a mythical golden statue.
You know we're out of money.
Yeah.
He's killed before and confident he can get away with murder again.
Being serious. If you love me, you'll kill her.
In Phoenix, Arizona, Alex Garcia is describing to investigators how his 14-year-old girlfriend, Michelle Hoover, snuck up on Alice Cameron at a campsite.
And Michelle shot Alice Cameron twice in the back while she laid in the bed of her pickup truck.
Although injured, Alice is still alive.
She's thinking he is someone there to help her, alerted by the gunshots. But he's not there to help her, he's there to watch her die.
And she said, "Why are you doing this to me?" She's conscious, she's able to see them and talk to them, and that apparently lasts for quite some time. And Michelle Hoover, in all of her young, amazing innocence, even though she's just committed this horrendous crime, they talk about how long is it going to take her to die.
Both Alex and Michelle seem to have what we would think of as sociopathic traits. Both were able to sit there and be with this woman that they just shot in cold blood and essentially be unfazed by it.
They made the erroneous assumption that she would have money, cash, credit cards, other things they could use. Turns out that she only had $1.59, a small amount of money.
The two wait, and without a care, watch their victim slowly die.
Alice was a very free spirit. She was beautiful. She was truly a beautiful, beautiful person. They killed her for money, and they got $1. So Alice's life was really only worth $1, which is particularly sad.
Incredibly, the sheriff's office also erroneously solved this murder by coercing a false confession from a man who was camping nearby.
That guy that the police put in prison, he had nothing to do with it. It was just me and Michelle.
One of the other district attorneys called me and said that they had arrested the man that killed my sister. And I asked about him, and they said he was a Vietnam veteran, and he was suffering stress, as many of them did. But he admitted that he killed her and gave him some facts, and he was now in jail. Well, 14 months passed, and I received a second call from the same gentleman saying there had been a terrible mistake. And I thought, a terrible mistake?
I was absolutely outraged. I immediately ordered his release.
Romley also makes good on his earlier promise to the sheriff. With no additional evidence against the Tucson Four, he drops all charges against them.
All right, well, there's going to be an order granting all three of these motions to dismiss without prejudice. There'll be an order that the defendants be released.
But I was humiliated and embarrassed that as a task force coordinator, I had allowed 4 innocent people to be coerced into confessing against their will.
The Tucson Four eventually share millions of dollars in compensation for what they endured. Michelle Hoover pleads guilty to second-degree murder for shooting Alice Cameron and is sentenced to 15 years in prison.
I didn't think it was a lot of time, but when it was explained to me that if it went to a jury, she would have said he did it, he would have said she did it, and then you'd have reasonable doubt. Then possibly she would have gotten off altogether.
What's clear is that she doesn't feel any remorse for the crime, only for the fact that she got caught.
In exchange for avoiding a possible death sentence, Alex Garcia agrees to plead guilty to 10 murders and to testify against Jonathan Duty. He is sentenced to 271 years in prison.
Alex was he was pure evil. I've never seen anyone whose eyes were as cold as his.